The rope scratched against Clara May's neck like a promise of death. She stood on the wooden platform, her bare feet cold against the rough planks, watching the sun creep over the red mesa that bordered Tombstone Creek. The crowd below her stirred, restlessly, their faces twisted with the ugly satisfaction of those who believed justice was finally being served. "Any last words, girl?" Sheriff Hawkins adjusted his hat, his weathered face showing no emotion. He'd been the one to arrest her 3 days ago, the one who'd refused to listen when she swore she hadn't killed Old Man Patterson. Clara May lifted her chin, her dark hair whipping in the desert wind. "I'm innocent," she said, her voice carrying across the silent street. "When the truth comes out, you'll all have to live with what you've done here today." A few people shifted uncomfortably, but most just glared. Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, clutched her shawl tighter. "Murderous harlot," she hissed. "Should have been done with this yesterday." The preacher stepped forward, his Bible trembling in his hands. "Lord, receive this sinner's soul," and the thunder of hooves cut through his prayer like a knife through cloth. Every head turned toward the sound, and Clara May felt her heart leap into her throat. A lone rider was charging down Main Street, dust billowing behind his black horse like smoke from hell itself. As he drew closer, gasps rippled through the crowd. Even from the platform, Clara May could see why. The man sat his horse like he was born to it, his black duster coat flowing. Behind him, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. But it wasn't his appearance that made grown men step back. It was the reputation that rode with him like a shadow. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. "That's Jake Murdoch." The name hit the crowd like a physical blow. Conversations died. Children were pulled behind their mothers' skirts. Even Sheriff Hawkins's hand moved instinctively to his gun, though everyone knew it would be suicide to draw on the most feared gunslinger in the territory. Jake Murdoch reined in his horse just feet from the gallows, the animal snorting and pawing at the dirt. Slowly, he lifted his head, and Clara May got her first clear look at the man who'd just ridden into her nightmare. His face was lean and hard, carved by wind and sun and violence. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, and his eyes were the color of winter sky, cold and merciless. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried like the whisper of a rattlesnake. "Cut her down." Sheriff Hawkins found his voice first. "Now hold on, Murdoch, this is legal business. The girl killed—" "The girl," Jake interrupted, his hand resting casually on the grip of his Colt, "is my bride." The words hit Clara May like a physical blow. She stared down at this stranger, this killer whose name was spoken in the same breath as the devil himself, and felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "You're what?" Hawkins sputtered. Jake's horse stepped sideways, bringing him closer to the platform. "My bride. We were married by proxy in Santa Fe 2 months ago. Any of you boys want to hang my wife, you'll have to go through me first." The lie rolled off his tongue smooth as honey, but Clara May caught something in his eyes, a warning maybe, or a plea for her to play along. Either way, it was her only chance. "Jake," she whispered, putting all the relief she could muster into her voice. "I knew you'd come." He nodded once, never taking his eyes off the sheriff. "Course I did, darlin'. No man touches what's mine." Hawkins was sweating now, despite the morning chill. "You got papers? Proof of this marriage?" "You calling me a liar, Sheriff?" Jake's voice dropped another octave and his hand tightened on his gun. Around the crowd, men began backing away, creating a clear space around the gallows. No, I ain't." Hawkins raised his hands. "But the girl confessed." "The hell I did." Clara May found her voice. "I told you I was innocent, same as I'm telling you now." Jake smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Seems to me you boys are about to make a real big mistake. See? I take it personal when folks try to hurt my family. Real personal." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Everyone knew Jake Murdoch's reputation. 12 men dead in fair fights and rumors of twice that many who'd simply disappeared. He was fast, he was ruthless, and he held grudges like other men held onto their souls. "Cut the rope," someone called, from the crowd. "Let her go, Sheriff." "Yeah," another voice added. Ain't worth it. Sheriff Hawkins looked around at his town, saw the fear in every face, and made the only choice he could. With shaking hands, he reached up and loosened the noose from Clara May's neck. She gasped, her knees nearly buckling with relief. Jake was there in an instant, swinging down from his horse and climbing the platform steps 2 at a time. His hands were surprisingly gentle as he helped her down, though she could feel the controlled violence in every movement. You hurt? He asked quietly, his voice meant for her ears alone. She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Good. He turned to face the crowd, one arm around Clara May's shoulders. Much obliged for looking after my wife, folks. We'll be on our way now. Hold on, Hawkins called, desperation creeping into his voice. Even if she is your wife, that don't change the fact that Patterson's dead. Someone's got to answer for that. Jake's smile was colder than a January wind. You find the real killer, Sheriff, but you lay one finger on my wife again and you'll answer to me. We clear? The sheriff nodded quickly, and Jake helped Clara May onto his horse, settling behind her with practiced ease. As they rode out of town, she could feel every eye following them, could hear the whispers starting already. Once they were clear of the buildings, Clara May finally spoke. Why? She asked, her voice barely audible over the horse's hooves. Why did you save me? Jake was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally he said, Maybe I just don't like seeing innocent folks swing. How do you know I'm innocent? This time his laugh held no humor at all. Honey, I've killed enough men to know the look of a killer. You ain't got it. They rode in silence after that, heading west toward the setting sun and whatever uncertain future awaited them. Behind them, Tombstone Creek shrank to a speck on the horizon, but Clara May knew the town's judgment would follow them wherever they went. She'd been saved from the noose, but she was far from safe. Now she was tied to the most dangerous man in the territory, a stranger whose motives she couldn't fathom. And somewhere behind them, the real killer was still walking free, while the law would be hunting them both. The sun was fully up now, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. It should have been the day she died, but instead it was the first day of whatever came next. Clara May closed her eyes and tried not to think about the stories she'd heard about Jake Murdoch, tried not to wonder if she'd simply traded one form of death for another. 3 days of hard riding had taken them deep into the Sonoran Desert, where the sun was an unforgiving master, and water was more precious than gold. Jake had pushed them hard, stopping only when the horses couldn't go another step. Now, as evening painted the sky in shades of purple and orange, they made camp in a small canyon protected by towering rock walls. Clara May watched Jake tend to the horses, noting how his hands moved with quiet competence over the animals. He'd barely spoken since they'd left Tombstone Creek, responding to her questions with grunts or single-word answers. The silence was wearing on her nerves. How long are we going to keep running? She asked, poking at their small fire with a stick. Jake didn't look up from checking his horse's hooves. Until it's safe to stop. And when will that be? This time he did look at her, his pale eyes reflecting the firelight. When whoever framed you for murder is dead or behind bars. The word sent a chill down her spine. You really think someone set me up? I know they did. He moved to her horse, running his hands along the animal's legs with practiced ease. Question is, who and why? Clara May had been asking herself the same questions for days. I worked at Patterson's store for 2 years. Never had any trouble with him, never even raised my voice to the man. When they found his body in the back room and saw me standing over him with blood on my hands, she shuddered at the memory. Tell me exactly what happened that night. She'd told the story a dozen times to the sheriff, to the judge, to anyone who'd listen, but Jake's attention felt different, focused and analytical like a hunter studying tracks. I was closing up the store. Mr. Patterson had gone home hours earlier, or so I thought. I was checking the back room for any merchandise that needed to be put away when I heard a noise, like something falling. She stared into the fire, seeing, that night again. I found him on the floor behind the big shipping crates. There was blood everywhere and his cash box was empty. You touched him? I tried to help him. He was still breathing, but barely. I got blood all over my hands, my dress. Then Mrs. Henderson came looking for her husband. He'd been drinking at the saloon, and she saw me there, started screaming that I was a murderer. Jake was quiet for a moment, processing her words. Patterson say anything before he died? Clara May shook her head. He tried to, but it was just gasps. He died before the doctor could get there. What about the cash box? How much was in it? Maybe $50. It was Saturday night, so all the week's earnings were there. Jake sat back on his heels, his brow furrowed in thought. $50 ain't worth killing a man over, not for most folks. And why leave you there to take the blame? Any smart thief would have made sure you were long gone before the body was found. The implication hit her like a physical blow. You think whoever did this wanted me to be blamed? I think someone wanted Patterson dead, and you hanged for it. 2 birds, 1 stone. The idea was terrifying, but it made a horrible kind of sense. But who would want to hurt me? I don't have any enemies, at least none that I know of. Jake stood, dusting off his hands. We'll figure that out. But first, we need to get you someplace safe. Where? Every lawman in the territory will be looking for us now. They think I'm a murderer and you're harboring a fugitive. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Honey, I've been an outlaw for so long, I've forgotten what the inside of a church looks like. One more charge ain't gonna make much difference. Despite everything, Clara May found herself almost smiling back. Why are you helping me? Really? You could have ridden on and never looked back. Jake was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it. Had a sister once, about your age, maybe a little younger. She got accused of something she didn't do, and nobody would listen. Nobody stood up for her. What happened to her? She died. The words were flat, final. I wasn't there to help her, but I'm here now. Clara May felt tears prick her eyes at the pain she heard beneath his gruff exterior. I'm sorry. He nodded once, then turned away. Get some sleep, we ride before dawn. She made her bedroll near the fire while Jake took the first watch, settling with his back against a boulder where he could see the canyon entrance. The desert night was full of sounds, the yip of coyotes, the rustle of small creatures in the brush, the occasional hoot of an owl. But over it all, Clara May could hear the steady rhythm of Jake's breathing, and somehow that made her feel safer than she had in days. She was drifting off to sleep when she heard it, the distant sound of horses moving through the desert. Jake was on his feet instantly, his hand on his gun. How many? Clara May whispered. 3, maybe 4. Coming fast. He moved to the horses, quickly saddling them. We need to move. But it's dark. Better than being sitting ducks. He helped her onto her horse, his movements urgent but controlled. There's a trail up the back of this canyon, might be rough, but it'll get us out. They rode hard through the darkness, Jake somehow finding paths that Clara May couldn't even see. Behind them, she could hear their pursuers entering the canyon, the sound of hooves echoing off the rock walls. How did they find us so fast? She gasped, clinging to her horse's mane as they climbed a steep, rocky trail. Professional trackers, Jake replied grimly. Probably bounty hunters. Word's gotten out about the reward on your head. There's a reward? $500, dead or alive. The amount took her breath away. It was more money than most people saw in a year, enough to make any number of men willing to risk their lives hunting her down. They reached the top of the canyon just as the first shots rang out below. Jake cursed under his breath and urged his horse faster, leading them along a ridge that seemed to exist more in faith than in fact. There, one of their pursuers shouted. I see them. More gunshots echoed through the night, bullets whining off the rocks around them. Clara May's horse stumbled, and for a terrifying moment she thought they were going to tumble down into the darkness below. Jake was beside her instantly, grabbing her horse's bridle. Easy, girl. We're almost there. Almost. Where? Clara May could barely see 5 feet in front of them. Safe house. Old prospector's cabin about a mile ahead. If we can make it there. A bullet took his hat clean off his head, and Jake's demeanor shifted in an instant. The gentle protector disappeared, replaced by the cold killer the territory feared. He wheeled his horse around, drawing his Colt with deadly precision. "Keep riding," he told Clara May, his voice like ice. "Don't stop, don't look back. Follow this ridge until you see the cabin." "What about you?" His smile was terrible to behold. "I'm gonna remind these boys why folks cross the street when they see me coming." Before she could protest, he was gone, riding back toward their pursuers with the calm certainty of a man who'd faced death so many times it had become an old friend. Clara May kicked her horse forward, tears streaming down her face as the sound of gunfire erupted behind her. She'd asked Jake why he was helping her, but now she understood. He wasn't just trying to save her. He was trying to save himself, to find some kind of redemption in protecting someone who couldn't protect herself. The cabin appeared ahead like a gift from God, and she rode toward it as fast as her tired horse could carry her, praying that Jake would survive the night to find her there. The old prospector's cabin sat like a forgotten memory against the desert hillside, its weathered boards silver in the moonlight. Clara May had been waiting there for 3 hours when she finally heard the sound of a single horse approaching. Her hand closed around the rusty mining pick she'd found inside, her heart hammering against her ribs. When Jake emerged from the shadows, she nearly wept with relief. Blood stained his shirt, and he moved with the careful precision of a wounded man. But he was alive. "How bad?" she asked, rushing to help him dismount. "Just a graze." He winced as she touched his shoulder. "Bullet creased my ribs, nothing more." "What happened to them?" Jake's expression was grim as he unsaddled his horse. "2 won't be bothering anybody ever again." The third one decided discretion was the better part of valor and rode off into the night. Clara May helped him into the cabin, where she'd managed to get a small fire going in the stone fireplace. In the flickering light, she could see that his wound was worse than he'd let on. The bullet had torn through his shirt and carved a bloody furrow along his ribs. "Sit down," she ordered, surprising herself with her firmness. "Let me look at that." "I'm fine." "Sit down, Jake Murdoch, or I'll knock you down myself." Something in her tone made him comply, settling onto a rough wooden chair while she examined his wound. Using water from his canteen and strips torn from her petticoat, she cleaned the blood away as gently as she could. "You've done this before?" he observed, watching her work. "My mother was the closest thing to a doctor Tombstone Creek had for a while. I helped her with the wounded." Clara May tried not to think about how many of those wounds had been caused by the man sitting in front of her. As she worked, Jake talked, maybe to distract himself from the pain, or maybe because the events of the night had shaken something loose in him. "That sister I told you about," he said quietly. "Her name was Mary. She was 17, worked as a seamstress in Abilene. One of the town council members took a shine to her, wouldn't take no for an answer." Clara May's hands stilled on the bandage she was wrapping around his ribs. When she kept refusing him, he had her accused of stealing from the dress shop where she worked, said she'd been taking fabric home, selling it on the side. It was a lie, but his word carried weight in that town. What happened? They sentenced her to 5 years in prison. She was so fragile, so gentle. Prison would have killed her slow, and we both knew it. Jake's voice grew distant, lost in the memory. Night before they were supposed to transport her, she got hold of a piece of broken glass. Clara May closed her eyes, understand. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Clara May felt her breath catch, not sure how to respond to such unexpected vulnerability from the man the territory knew as death incarnate. A sound outside froze them both. The soft nickering of horses, the creak of leather, the whispered voices of men trying to move quietly through the darkness. Jake was on his feet instantly, his Colt in his hand despite his injury. "They followed my trail," he whispered. "Should have expected that." "How many?" "Sounds like half a dozen, maybe more." He moved to the window, peering out through a crack in the wooden shutter. "Too many to fight head-on, especially wounded. There's gotta be another way out." Jake nodded toward the back of the cabin. "Mining shaft back there. Probably connects to the old tunnel system, but it'll be dark as pitch and no telling if it's stable. Better than staying here to get shot. Clara May. He caught her arm as she moved toward the back door. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen. If it does, he insisted. You keep running. Don't look back. Don't try to help. Get to Mexico if you can. I've got friends there who'll hide you. She wanted to argue, but the sound of footsteps on the cabin's front porch cut her off. Instead, she nodded, and Jake pressed a small leather pouch into her hands. Gold coins, he whispered. Enough to get you started somewhere new. They slipped out the back door just as the front door exploded inward. Shouts erupted behind them as their pursuers discovered the empty cabin, but by then Jake and Clara May were already disappearing into the black mouth of the abandoned mine. The tunnel was everything Jake had warned, dark, narrow, and treacherous. They felt their way along by touch, Jake leading despite his injury, moving deeper into the hillside as the sounds of their hunters grew fainter behind them. There, Jake whispered after what felt like hours. Light ahead. The tunnel opened onto a narrow ledge on the far side of the hill, overlooking a valley Clara May had never seen before. Dawn was breaking in the east, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. We made it, she breathed, but when she turned to Jake, she saw blood soaking through his bandages. The exertion had reopened his wound, and he was pale with blood loss. I'm all right, he said, but his voice was weaker than before. Clara May knew he wasn't all right, knew they needed to find shelter and medical attention soon, but as she looked out over the valley below, she also knew they were further from civilization than ever, in a landscape that could kill them as easily as any bounty hunter. She helped Jake down from the ledge, her mind racing. Somewhere behind them, their pursuers were still searching. Somewhere ahead lay an uncertain future in a hostile land. And beside her walked a man who'd killed for her, bled for her, and opened his heart to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. The sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the night's chill, and Clara May realized that everything she'd thought she knew about good and evil, about justice and law, had been stripped away in the space of a few days. All she knew for certain was that she was alive. Jake Murdoch was the reason why, and whatever came next, they would face it together. 2 weeks later, they sat on the porch of a small adobe house in the village of Esperanza, 30 miles south of the border. Jake's wound had healed cleanly thanks to the ministrations of an old Mexican woman named Esperanza, who'd asked no questions and accepted Jake's gold with quiet dignity. For the first time since the night of Patterson's murder, Clara May felt something approaching peace. Jake was teaching her to shoot, his hands steady and patient as he adjusted her grip on his spare Colt. Don't jerk the trigger, he said softly. Squeeze it slow and smooth like you're coaxing a bird to eat from your hand. The bottle 20 feet away exploded into a shower of brown glass, and Clara May whooped with triumph. I hit it. You did. Jake's smile was warm, free of the cold, calculation she'd grown accustomed to. Few more lessons and you'll be able to protect yourself. From who? We're in Mexico now, safe. Jake's expression grew serious. Clara May, there's something I need to tell you. I've been putting it off, but... She set the gun down, her stomach suddenly tight with dread. What is it? Before he could answer, the sound of horses approaching made them both tense. But these weren't the hard-riding bounty hunters they'd been running from. This was a small group moving at a leisurely pace, their voices carrying on the desert air. Americanos, Esperanza called from inside the house. 3 men coming this way. Jake was already moving, his hand on his gun. But as the riders drew closer, Clara May gasped in recognition. That's Sheriff Hawkins, she said, and Judge Morrison from Tombstone Creek. Jake's face went hard. They've come a long way to collect a bounty. Wait. Clara May squinted at the 3rd rider, a man she didn't recognize. That's not a lawman. Look at his clothes. He's dressed like a businessman. The 3 men rode into the small courtyard in front of the house, their horses blowing hard from the desert heat. Sheriff Hawkins looked older than Clara May remembered, his face gaunt and worried. Miss Sullivan, he called, not dismounting. We need to talk. Jake stepped in front of Clara May, his hand still on his gun. She's got nothing to say to you, Sheriff. Actually, Judge Morrison spoke up. She does. We've come to tell her she's free to come home. The words hit Clara May like a physical blow. What? The businessman cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps we could discuss this inside, away from the heat. Jake's voice was deadly quiet. Any discussion happens right here where I can see your hands. Sheriff Hawkins raised his hands peacefully. Jake, I know you got no reason to trust us, but we're here with good news. Miss Sullivan, the real killer's been caught. Clara May's legs nearly gave out. Who? Tommy Patterson, Judge Morrison said heavily. Old man Patterson's own nephew. The name hit Clara May like a slap. Tommy Patterson, barely 21, always smiling, always eager to help in the store. She'd liked him, had even felt sorry for him because his uncle worked him so hard. That's impossible, she whispered. The businessman who introduced himself as Mr. Garrett, a detective from Denver, shook his head. I'm afraid it's true, miss. Young Tommy confessed 3 days ago. Seems he'd been skimming money from the store for months using it to pay gambling debts. His uncle found out and threatened to turn him into the law. So he killed him, Jake said flatly. Garrett nodded. Hit him with a mining pick during an argument. Then he heard you coming, Miss Sullivan, and hid behind the shipping crates. He watched you find the body, get blood on your hands trying to help, and realized he had the perfect scapegoat. Clara May sank onto the porch step, overwhelmed. All this time, I thought. Why did he confess? Guilt, mostly, Sheriff Hawkins said. Been drinking heavy since you left town, talking in his sleep. His mother finally got the truth out of him and marched him down to my office herself. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. Miss Sullivan, on behalf of the Territory of Arizona, I want to formally apologize. A grave injustice was done to you, and we're here to make it right. Make it right? Jake's voice was full of cold fury. You people tried to hang an innocent woman. You drove her into the desert to die, and now you want to make it right? We're prepared to offer compensation, Garrett said quickly. $5,000 for Miss Sullivan's suffering and a full pardon for you, Mr. Murdoch, for any crimes committed while helping her. The offer hung in the air like smoke. $5,000 was a fortune, enough to start a new life anywhere she wanted, and Jake would be free, no longer hunted by every lawman in the territory. What's the catch? Jake asked. Judge Morrison looked uncomfortable. Well, we would need Miss Sullivan to return to Tombstone Creek for a formal hearing, clear her name, officially make sure all the paperwork is in order, and then you're both free to go wherever you please. Clara May looked up at Jake, trying to read his expression. What do you think? I think it sounds too easy, he said. But then again, sometimes the truth really does set people free. Sheriff Hawkins shifted in his saddle. There's one more thing. Tommy Patterson, he didn't make it to trial. Tried to escape custody 2 nights ago. My deputy shot him. The finality of it settled over Clara May like a shroud. Tommy Patterson was dead, taking his guilt and his secrets with him. There would be no trial, no public vindication, just the quiet acknowledgement that she'd been innocent all along. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course, Judge Morrison said. We'll be staying in the village tonight. You can give us your answer in the morning. After they left, Clara May and Jake sat in silence on the porch watching the sun set over the desert. The peaceful life they'd begun to build in Esperanza suddenly felt fragile, temporary. Do you want to go back? Jake asked finally. Clara May considered the question. Part of me does. I want to clear my name, want people to know the truth, but? She looked at him. This dangerous man who'd become her protector, her teacher, her friend. What happens to us if I go back? You'll be pardoned, free to go anywhere. You won't need to stay with me anymore. Jake was quiet for so long, she thought. He wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. Clara, I'm saying that maybe God put me on that road to Tombstone Creek for a reason. Maybe saving you was how I was supposed to find my way back to being human. He turned to face her fully. I love you, Clara May Sullivan. I know I'm not much of a catch. I've got more blood on my hands than any decent woman should have to live with, but I love you. Tears sprang to her eyes. Jake, I know you probably can't feel the same way about a man like me. She silenced him by pressing her lips to his, pouring all her confusion and gratitude and growing love into the kiss. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. I love you too, she whispered. I never thought I could love someone like you, but I do. They held each other as the stars came out, two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other's arms. Tomorrow they would have to decide whether to return to the world that had wronged them both, or to stay in this small sanctuary they'd built together. But tonight, they were simply Jake and Clara May, no longer the feared gunslinger and the condemned woman, but two people who'd found love in the most unlikely place, and for now that was enough. The next morning they gave their answer to the waiting officials. They would return to Tombstone Creek, not for the money or the pardons, but to face the truth together. Clara May would clear her name, and Jake would face whatever consequences awaited him with his head held high. As they rode north toward their old life, Clara May realized that redemption wasn't something that could be granted by judges or bought with gold. It was something you earned by choosing to be better than your worst moments, by standing up for what was right even when it cost you everything.